Good day. The last live I did began, I think I was jokingly calling myself a dumbass, and I had looked at the live a couple of times, and every time I did, it started like you hit play and it went, Adam, you dumbass. And I was like, that doesn't feel good. That's not the energy I want people. I don't want to welcome people into a live with that energy. Well, welcome. This sort of little bit right now is a bit of the pre-show. This is, oh, I gotta stop that. Quiet you. Don't blast my speaker next to me. All right. This is the pre-show. Pre-show 9:45 to 10. This is where we're just getting settled, guys. We're just settling into the space. I'm going to welcome people as they come. Let me know, whoever you are. And I'm going to pour some tea into this sweet. Look at that. Look at that guy. I'm going to drink out of you, Mr. Ibu. Now, for those of you who attended 2 weeks ago, our live show, this is my dominant hand. I'm not going to buffalo myself. I'm going to drink out of this hand, but I'm going to pour the tea this way. This is how it's going to go. Hey, Robin, happy Friday. Are you at home? For those of you, well, many of you probably won't know, but Robin's almost a neighbor for me. She lives just down the street, and I actually ran into her husband jogging. It was kind of funny. I don't know if Luke told you this, Robin. We live out in the sort of countryside up on a beautiful ridge. Hey, Alexandra. Yeah, hello. So we live on this ridge, and then the land kind of goes down. You can see across to Mount Baker, which is this gorgeous mountain down in Washington State in the States, and on the other side you can see sort of across this big body of water, what's called Finlayson Arm. So it's just a gorgeous place, and I often take my clients and my calls walking because I find sitting in front of a computer not my best energy. The computer is very distracting. I don't like being confined. And if I'm out moving my body and walking and in nature, it's very refreshing and energizing for me. Anyhow, I was walking on this call with a client. It was it was a really tender moment that we were in, and I heard very loudly, "There he is!" And I was like, what's happening? And it was Robin's husband, Luke, in his French Canadian accent, on a jog, who just stopped to say hi, and I had to embarrass it. Oh, I'm on the phone and walk by. I don't know if he shared that with you, Robin. I thought that was kind of funny. Who else is here? We've got Robin, we've got Alexandra. Who else is here for this early start? We're going to take a sip together. Ooh, I want you to, there we go. I don't want my knuckles to touch the hot mug. You need a gap. This, by the way, is the minimum number of fingers acceptable to have in a handle. Any handle that demands that kind of holding, I don't like that. I want 3 minimum. That's the min number of fingers. Ooh, good evening and happy Friday from Denmark. Well, Guten Tag, would that be appropriate to say? That would be German, wouldn't it? And I don't know what Danish. Tell me how we would say good evening in Danish, Michelle. I'm going to start. I'm going to light a bit of Palo Santo, primarily because I love the smell of it. Get this cool lighter. Just get this guy burning a little bit. Started off just so spiritual, so deeply spiritual. Get a nice burn on that. Turn that off, and then here we go. We'll use this smudging feather that I brought back from Costa Rica to smudge some of that smoke around the office. Oh, yeah, get over there. And then I realize I don't have my little place to put this. So I'm just going to go quickly grab this sand bowl that I keep especially for this purpose right here. I'm going to let that sit there and kick up some smoke. Palo Santo, I think, smells really good. I love the smell of it. And there's a couple of reasons I love the smell of it. And I want to artfully, we'll find out, but artfully segue this into like the notion of spirituality and ritual and its power. You'd say God aften. God aften. Am I pronouncing that right, Michelle? Give me the phonetic pronunciation so I can say it correctly. Yeah, I like those Facebook subtitles too, Alexandra. Best of luck putting the little one to sleep. Right. So one of the things I love about Palo Santo, first of all, is just the places where I experience it, the smell of it are typically ones that have been in ceremony or ritual or something like that. So it's where people have intentionally set up a space so as to allow kind of a spiritual experience or a ceremony to be run. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you every time we get into our hot tub, for example, the smell of chlorine meets my nose, and scent is very evocative. And so what that does is it takes me right back to being a kid, going and getting swimming lessons at Panorama Rec Center, which is just down the road from where we live. So it really takes me back to that space. And so one of the things I love about Palo Santo is that all of the places where I've smelled that smell are spaces in which someone has already put into effort or energetically put in motion, kind of creating a beautiful space, creating a clearing where something's going to happen. And that's, it's not like I don't usually associate someone smudging the smell of Palo Santo with a crime infested dark alley, because that's not where people are doing that. And they're not putting that sort of practice into place. And so, one, and I'm just going to open a window here. One, it has like a really nice association for me. And that's part of what I really love about the power of ritual and ceremony is that, if you were to look at my windowsill here, you'd see like a whole bunch of crystals. This is, what are you? You're labradite, and you are smoky quartz. I'll show you one more cool guy, which I'm pretty sure this is a geode that has not been, cut and then smooth. It's like round geode. And I brought that guy back from um, Peru when I was taking people on a trip to Machu Picchu with my friend Nathan. And I don't place any significance on these crystals. So I don't relate to this smoky quartz like this capture. I don't know what smoky quartz does. You could look it up very quickly, but it does what it pertains to do. I don't impute any magical properties to this, and I don't impute any magical properties to labradite. And you're welcome to. I have zero interest in changing your mind or imposing my perspective onto you. But what I do know is that each of these sort of things is associated with a particular moment in time for me. And when we're creating ceremony, we're creating ceremony and ritual, we're putting intention into something. And anytime you put any kind of intention into anything, there's going to be power behind that. Where we put our attention has power. And so the fact that I've set up my office around me with all of these cool kind of like, we've got this guy, this is a beautiful looking rock too. Someone could tell me what all of these are. All of these speak to the intention I've put into the space around me. And so the space on some level, and whatever level you want to hold this at is perfect, but the space around me is surrounded with a particular kind of intention. And when I come into this space, that's the intention I feel. I think this is one of the reasons it's so valuable to make our bed in the morning, because that begins our day with some intention. And when we come back into our bedroom, that intention imbues the room. So a lot of the shamans that I've worked with and talked to about this have shared kind of, if you ever sit in ayahuasca ceremony, they use these sort of feathers they'll fan you if you're in the process of going through something. Not always, but that's often part of the experience. You're moving energy and they'll fan your chest and then bring it up and then maybe like sort of pull the energy off of you. And one of the shaman I was talking to, I ran into him in the airport and he was like, yeah, the part of the magic of that is that people believe in it. And in their belief in something, that makes it easier for them to let go of whatever they're holding on to. So it works because people believe it works. And what is so profound for me about that is that really speaks to the power of our beliefs. What we put intention, what we put energy into, what we really buy into, the belief that we empower is the belief that becomes our reality on some level. Damn, it smells good in here. I'm going to start us off by reading a couple passages. We've got some awesome topics today. I'm stoked. Hey, Evan. Hey, Katie. Katie, I don't think you and I have gotten to talk much. Where are you from, Katie? Tell me where you are from. Please reveal that. I'm going to start by reading a passage from probably my all-time favorite book, Illusions by Richard Bach. And I'm going to read a little bit from The Spectrums of Being, now called Who Do You Think You Are? What the Mirror Doesn't Show You About Leadership. That's the published title of this book. So I'll share a bit about this as we go forward, but I'm going to just start by reading a couple passages here. So this is right at the start of Illusions begins a parable, and then the rest of the book is kind of normal text. We're in the parable part. Um, the current of the river. Oh, wait, hold on. Let me go back to the start of this rather than just drop you right in the middle. Oh, Victoria. Oh, cool. Of course. Now I remember Katie. Well, nice to have you with us. Once there lived a village of creatures along the bottom of a great crystal river. The current of the river swept silently over them all, young and old, rich and poor, good and evil, the current going its own way, knowing only its own crystal self. Each creature in its own manner clung tightly to the twigs and rocks of the river bottom, for clinging was their way of life, and resisting the current what each had learned from birth. But one creature said at last, I am tired of clinging. Though I cannot see it with my eyes, I trust that the current knows where it is going. I shall let go, and let it take me where it will. Clinging, I shall die of boredom. The other creatures laughed and said, Fool! Let go, and that current you worship will throw you tumbled and smashed across the rocks, and you will die much quicker than by boredom. But the one heeded them not, and taking a breath, did let go, and at once was tumbled and smashed by the current across the rocks. Yet in time, as the creature refused to cling again, the current lifted him free from the bottom, and he was bruised and hurt no more. And the creatures downstream, to whom the one was a stranger, cried, Look, a miracle, a creature like ourselves, and yet he flies. See the Messiah, come to save us all. And the one carried in the current said, I am no more Messiah than you. The river delights to lift us free, if only we dare let go. Our true work is this voyage, this adventure. But they cried all the more, Savior, all the while clinging to the rocks. And when they looked again, he was gone, and they were left alone, making legends of a Savior. Ah, such poetry in that piece, and such a beautiful metaphor for how we live our lives. And how, if it's easy intellectually to be like, oh yeah, got it, I got to just do that. But in the moment, I'm often so present to my own desire to cling to the rocks and twigs. And that's what we learn. That's how we are trained by the world around us. And frankly, the world around us gives us a ton of evidence to support that belief. And so that's the belief we live into, and that's the belief we live from. We live into our beliefs, and we live from our beliefs. I love what you said there, Alexandra. We all have different life-saving gear. Crystals, burning sage, sugar, running marathons, etc. I like LSD. I like alcohol. I like video games a lot. Interesting, there's always, at least for me, there's the continuum between something being fun and just something I'm enjoying, and then very quickly can move into something I'm using to numb myself. And this is part of the reason, just trying to look at a behavior in and of itself, right? Like, oh, video games, and then deducing that's bad. Video games are bad, I should stop playing video games, misses that nuance. Because for a lot of us, eating chips is delicious. Hey, Wilson, I heard you're on your way out of Europe. Let us know where you're heading. Where are you moving to after Europe? And greetings. Nice to see you show up again. It's been a long while. We are like, oh, eating chips is bad. I eat too many chips. It's getting in the way of something, blah, blah, blah. And then what we try to do is we cut that doing, that thing we do, that pattern, that habit out of our lives wholesale. And we do so without any awareness or nuance or distinction. We're just like, that thing I do is bad. But that thing we do, there's some pleasure in it too. Otherwise, we'd aim ourselves towards something else that allows us to numb and is pleasurable at once. So there's really, at least for me, often a path of kind of sobriety, but not abstinence. Not just chopping stuff out of my life wholesale, but really like, how can I enjoy this in a really sober way? How can I enjoy a nice cocktail without then drinking 6 more? And then numbing myself out and not having to think about my day or the things I'm worried of or the fears that might be showing up in my life in this or any of that sort of stuff. So that's where art lies, I believe, is learning to show up to life sober and not making that mean we're cutting anything out or whatever and whatever. And I want to be clear, I'm not making a statement about alcoholism and what you should and shouldn't do if you have a challenge with drink or whatever that sort of thing is. To be clear, I choose not to partake in marijuana at all because I do not have the capacity, at least yet, and possibly never, to enjoy that soberly. It's just too easy an off-ramp for my survival mechanism. It's too compelling, too delicious. It's too much, ooh, I'm getting to experience novelty and inspiration without any of the associated fear that often shows up with those two things. I can just smoke up and, oh, everything's inspiring and I'm inspired to create and blah, blah, blah. And I never have to generate myself in that. I just get to like put fuel in my car and it takes off on its own. That's not what I'm about. All right, well, it's 10 o'clock. It's usually when we start. Where is Nevis or Nevi or Nevis? Where is that, Wilson? I don't know that place. We have some awesome topics, and I want to talk about them. So I'm going to bring them up here, a little thing. I start first thing free. Oh, I got to look up where is my free resources page so that I can put a link in the comments. So I've been creating content for many, many years, and oh, British West Indies, cool. That sounds like a very neat place to go. I'm trying to think how I initially got into this, and I think it was purely a like kind of something it was a whim. So I picked up the website Canva. It actually began because I was pretty baked. I was stoned, and I was getting stoned a lot. Like you could call it an active addiction. I'm very high functioning in my active addiction, but active addiction nonetheless. And I was at a coffee shop and someone had said like, hey, I think you should check out canva.com. It's very cool. Let's put the website in here so you've got it, canva.com. It's a neat website. You can throw together cool designs and stuff like that. And so I was like, I was in a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, stoned, like, what should I do? I'll open this up. And then just started creating. I was like, oh, this is cool. And I could move stuff around. And I've always enjoyed that. And very quickly, I started to see like, oh, there's an opportunity here to bring some of the work that I do with people as a coach and the work I support coaches to take on into a visual medium that they could hopefully sort of look at and get a better sense of it. And the truth is that transformation never really lies in the realm of information. So like a visual graphic is only going to get you so far because it can't stand there with its hand on your back and saying, hey, you're not choosing the thing. You're talking about the thing over and over and over. It's been 3 weeks. You've said you really want to do this thing. So is it time to do that? It can't do that, but it can help. It can open a bit of insight. It can point us in a direction, help us start to see something more. So I've been creating this stuff and I put it on Facebook, and most of the content I create is it's not what you want to spend a lot of time looking at when you're scrolling, right? You scroll, what's interesting? There's a picture of someone topless. That person's hot. This is kind of interesting. In truth, most of the content I create is not really well suited to Facebook. Oh, well, that's the medium I'm on. I'm not totally clear what to do about that. I don't devote too much time to that. And so, good morning, Andrew. Thanks for being here. Nice to have you with us. So anyhow, what's happened is I put it out and then it kind of just sits somewhere and no one gets the benefit of it. And so I created a place on my website for you to download all of the content that I've been creating, all of the distinctions, infographics, handouts, and that'll be a place that just continues to grow as I make more stuff. And for me, I don't make this stuff in order to. So I don't do this stuff because I'm hoping that'll create clients, because this is a miserable way to create clients in my experience. I do it because I love it. And it's just inspiring to me. And when I break this stuff out into a graphic and have to do the hard work of kind of showing my work, help bringing people along so they can like, oh, I can see how this plays out. That first of all is fun for me, if not a little challenging, which is more of the fun, but it makes me more masterful in my own work because I have to slow down and take people with me instead of just being like, this is the answer, hurry the fuck up, figure it out. So that's why I do this. That's the fun in it. And I want to share it. I want to create places for people to be able to access that. And so you can download all of this stuff right here on my website. I created Adam Quiney, if you go to my website, adamquiney.com, and then you just go under lab and click resources, it'll take you to this page that I've bookmarked here. And all you have to do is sign up for my mailing list, which you should be a member of anyhow if you're not already. It's usually a bi-monthly email, or maybe sometimes 4 times a month, that I send out only ever on Fridays, usually just a post, an invitation, something that I'm up to. And once you sign up for that, if you're already a member, you don't get extra emails. And once you've signed up for it, it takes you to a page where you can just download all of this stuff and do with it whatever you like. And you can you can immediately unsubscribe and then just keep using that link that we've provided to keep coming back here. So that's always available. I'll probably there's maybe a point where I'll start putting the book out for free. As one of the authors who really made a difference for me was Dusan Jukic. I'm just going to grab his book off the shelf here because it's also one of my faves. He wrote this book. I've torn the dust cover off because I hate dust covers. Straight Line Leadership. This is the tab test. Remember the tab test? Look at all those tabs. I've not referenced this book in a while, but this is a phenomenal book. And Dusan wrote this book. He wanted to write, he's an interesting character. He's a big Trump supporter, which I am not, just for the record, not by far. And that's where I'll leave that. But this whole book is, every chapter is a distinction. So the title of each chapter, here's one: Content with Insight versus Only Results Count. Content with insight versus only results count. If you really sat with that distinction alone and really asked yourself, which of those two places am I going to play in my life? And don't let yourself off the hook by saying, well, in here I'm going to do this, but in here I'm going to do that. And in some, no. That's not the point. That's not the purpose of a distinction. A distinction is it forces you down a particular path and makes you make a decision. This is the book, Katie. It's called Straight Line Leadership. And I'm going to put a link to Dusan's, I think he's Straight Line Coach. Let me just make sure. Straightlinecoach.com. Is that it? Loading. Of course, it's going to load slow. Here you go. And you can actually get this book for free off of his website, which is why I got onto this topic. I've just put in the link. So you go there, you click North America, click under resources or something, and I think there's a link to the book. You have to sign up for the mailing list, but they just give you the book. Did that come through? It doesn't look like it actually did. Let me try. Oh, there it is. It just came through. So realistic optimism versus unrealistic pessimism. I'm just going to read you through these. Being bold versus being arrogant. Discomfort and pain versus chaos. Let's see what else we have. Extreme self-care versus selfishness. And here's probably my all-time favorite in this book. How to versus choose to. I'll just read you this quickly. This is one of the places I've got a tab, as you can tell. There's a big problem with the stance of knowing, needing to know. It's the idea that I need to know something before I can take action. And here's how it shows up. Quote, I don't know how to do this. Or, I don't know what to do. I want to do this, but I don't know how to do this. And here's how it also shows up this way. I would like to reach out and connect with people and let them know about my service, but I don't know who to call. So those are the 3 ways this dysfunction shows up. A, I don't know how to. B, I don't know what to. And C, I don't know who to. Let's start with I don't know how to. People say, I would do that, but I don't know how to. I would make these calls, but I don't know how to make cold calls in a graceful way. I would reach out and find people who have an interest in my service or product, but I don't know how to find them. I would patent my inventions, but I don't know how. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do that. Well, there's no longer any truth to that, because if you simply go on Google and you type in how to and then fill in the blank, you'll get so many articles and so many interviews and so many interesting pages of advice, enough of which can be quite useful that you could get into action right away. And if there's specific information which is truly needed, your choose to stance will provide it. A powerful choose to stance will cure ignorance and an inadequate skill set every time. You can find out how to do anything. The how to is never really what's missing. The choosing to is what's missing. Potent book. So he just had this on his website, and I have no idea how I arrived at it, but I found that website and I downloaded that book. I think someone had maybe sent me one of his PDFs. They had a whole bunch of free PDFs. And I was like, oh, they had this book. And I started reading this book and I was like, oh my goodness, this book's incredible. I had a number of conversations with the author, Dushan, and I found him, he's a very strong stand, but I found him quite abrasive. And there was a period where I was like, that's what I need from a coach. And in hindsight, probably not. I think something would have really been created, but he really leans heavily on the line of rigor rather than love. Anyhow, amazing book, and I'm sure, like, I think as a coach, he creates a lot of results for a lot of people. But I wonder how much. Well, who knows? I was going to say I wonder how much he's reliable to support people creating breakthroughs in love or trust or these sort of things. I suspect the breakthroughs are more in making your life happen, which is just as important. Highly recommend that book, aside from all these weird caveats I'm throwing in. And so, all that being said, the reason I got on this tangent, it's the good book's fault, not mine, is I created this resources page. So there's a place where you can come and go. And I think I will probably start to add books there, because what I really want is for people to get the gift of this material and to have an impact rather than to make money or to become an Amazon. I could care less about being an Amazon bestseller, but I do want people to get access to this work. Okay, I think that's the free resources chat. He needed to scale. Boy, we all need to scale, don't we? Oh, if only we can scale. Scale. Oh, scale. I need to scale. So much attention on scaling. And not a lot of thought as to why. I notice most of the conversation about scaling really feels to me like a reaction to a fear that's undistinguished. So the fear is like, people often say, well, you can't keep trading your time for your money, so you have to scale. And that you can't keep trading your time for your money belief is never actually addressed. It's just sort of like, here's a fundamental truth of the world. Now, from that fundamental truth of the world, we got to scale. Okay, let's start fucking running. And people are like, fuck, I got to scale. And it's like, well, but maybe we should look at that belief. Is that a belief that really serves you in this moment? Is there a point where you want a new belief? Is that belief worth examining? All of that gets stepped over in the race to scale. Also, by the way, hashtag 6 figures. Get yourself 6 figures. It feels, I'm just reading what you said here, Andrew. It feels like the trust and the capability to find your way based on what you were reading. Can you say that maybe differently? I think I'm with you. I just got a little lost in the way you worded it. Okay. Let's talk about, I think I'm going to hit what you said first, Alexandra. I really loved your topic. A lot of you, Alexandra, David, Sherifat, thank you so much. Robin, who else provided a question? Someone else emailed me earlier. Oh, I think it was you, Andrew. So big thank you to everyone providing topics. I notice when people provide these, they're like, there's a, I hope that's a suitable topic, or like if that would fit into your agenda. And I just want to make an open invitation right now. Please, I so appreciate when people generously contribute. That's a real contribution to me when people provide topics like that. Hey, this is going on in my life. And hopefully it's a contribution to yourself. Hopefully the conversation that emerges from you putting that forward is something that benefits you. So for everyone that ever has that thought, like, oh, I don't know if I should put this forward, please put it forward. We all benefit from it. So, Alexander, I'm going to read some of what you said. So the piece here is, Alexandra says, I am deep connection. Who I am is connection. Get out of here, Siri. You're not invited to this party. Make sure I've turned this off. There we go. I am deep connection. Who I am is the being of connection. And the thing is, I'm starting to feel like this is becoming a bit of a burden. So it sounds like the division is almost all my conversations are either like 5 questions or small talk lines, like what's the weather like, blah, 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 that kind of thing. Or people laying their biggest traumas or biggest dreams or biggest secrets on me. So it's kind of like either we stay at the surface level or we plunge into the depths of psyche and the sort of we take on the 10,000 pound gorilla that exists somewhere deep back in your memory. And we're in that conversation that's kind of heavy. So in the past, this used to be really validating. Wow, they value me, they trust me enough to share this, but now it's kind of a lot. And Alexander's sharing, I kind of want to build some walls because I tend to take other stories and emotions and put them to heart. And I want to become more nuanced to my empathy and listening. So I would say, first of all, this is incredibly relatable from connection, probably from a lot of us, but for people who are connection, you'll notice I'm not talking about introverts or extroverts because I don't think that's a good distinction. I think that that is actually the way connection shows up, two ways that connection shows up from its fears. And I think people will choose into one of those two places if you put it in front of them. But I think that the people that tend to be most concerned and focused on that distinction are people who already are a connection, because that's where our attention, whereas people that are brilliant are like, yeah, whatever, I'm an introvert, let me go and they're not that fixated on it. And so for people who are a connection, the first thing that it's worth considering here is that this quality of being, if you're someone with this quality of being, connection is very innate and deep for you. You meet someone and immediately you're like, oh, we're in something here. There's an immediate opening into the space. Connection is almost, you could think of it a little bit like, what's that? Uh, Avatar. A little bit like Avatar, right? People who are connection are plugging their tails into shit. And it's like, oh my God, I can feel you and I can see you and that's crazy. So Alexandra, I will talk endlessly about those labels. A bit of a bug up my ass about them. So that's the nature, though, of connection is we plug in with people very deeply, and that can be really that is intimidating. It can be intimidating for the other person. It can be intimidating for us, and we learn from that to be a little frightened by it. We can feel very naked, very vulnerable, very you see me, like we're plugged in. There's a lot of my stuff has fallen away and you're seeing who I am. We can see other people's stuff fall away and see a lot of who they are. And we can get the feeling like, I'm too much or I'm not enough. And all of this stuff shows up. So just in the incredible intimacy that naturally gets created from this quality of being, fears arise. And those fears, typically fear arises in two flavors. When it's about us, when it's an internal fear, it's typically that I'm too much or I'm not enough. And so if we draw that back to the being of connection, I'm too much, I connect too deeply with people, I'm too intense, there's too much here for them, or I'm not enough, I need to be more connected with them, blah, blah, blah. And so that leaves a couple of things happening. One is that if I'm afraid I'm not enough, one of the things I'm going to be afraid of is I'm worried I'm not connecting deeply enough with these people. I need to be more connected with them in this moment. There's more that should be happening. I'm robotic. I'm awkward. Common fear of mine. Often afraid at networking events when I'm talking to someone like, fuck, am I saying the right thing? Am I showing them enough of me? Do they need to see more? Maybe I need to tell them all about my deepest, darkest fears. So I'm compensating for the fear. And so from there, what tends to happen for connection is what looks like extroversion, what looks like someone who's really good at small talk. They can fill the void, they can talk endlessly, it's all blah, 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 blah. And it's what I would say you're describing, Alexandra, is like 5 questions, small talk lines, jokes, quips, blah, 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 blah. All of which it's important for us to note is on top of the fear and is a compensation. So if we could just trust that who we are is enough, if we didn't even have to be in that conversation, we wouldn't need to do any of that extra stuff. If I was able to let go of that dialogue internally that, fuck, I'm awkward, I'm uncomfortable, I'm not sharing enough, if I could just drop that and trust this is exactly how there is for me to show up in this moment, this is all there is for me to be, then all of that other stuff I would discover is unnecessary. I don't need to be glib. I don't need to show up and seem interested. I don't need to make a funny joke or laugh at what they said or figure out the strategy to take what they said and take it to the next place and then twist it this way and then blah, 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 and relate it back to me. All of that becomes added effort. And that added effort is what is draining for us. That added effort is me doing something beyond what is naturally there for me to do. I'm being more than I already am. So it's kind of like, it's like if you had this phone and then you plugged like a second battery in it to give it more power, and it doesn't need that, but it's going to drain extra energy. And so that's a lot what these sort of shadows end up doing. Added effort, draining. The other side of this equation is where we connect really deeply with someone, and then we're afraid of leaving them feeling left. We're afraid of dropping them. We're afraid, like, fuck, I don't know how to leave this conversation. I don't know how to exit this conversation. And so what we learn to do is withdraw from people. And we tend to withdraw two ways. One is we're in a conversation with someone that's kind of deep, and we're just like, well, see you later. So I can remember this time where I was actually being trained as a coach at this time, and I was sitting at dinner after this intensive weekend we'd all been at, and this woman who's a friend of mine was sitting there sharing with me like some really deep stuff. And I was like, oh, I'm in this conversation, and my fear is, fuck, I'm too much, and I'm going to get stuck in this conversation forever. I will never be able to leave this conversation. Classic introvert fear. This person's going to need too much. Classic introvert fear, I should say. It's actually a classic connection fear, but never mind that. We'll use this false label. Classic introvert fear. I'm going to get stuck in this conversation forever. And so what I did in this situation is I saw another friend of mine get up to go to the bathroom, and I was like, hey, Sheldon, you going to the bathroom? Great. And I just vanished from the conversation. And at this point in my life, this was so automatic. I wasn't even aware that I was doing that. I was just like, I got to go to the bathroom. Sheldon's going to the bathroom. I'll go to the bathroom with him. This woman was left feeling totally dropped by me. So that's the first way we withdraw. The second way and of course, what do you imagine then the impact on the backside of that is? Fuck, I'm not enough. I pull away from people. I'm awkward. And then I swing out from the pendulum to the other side. And I swing back. You get the idea. The other thing we do is we preemptively try to prevent that situation. So we go out into the world looking, and we're like, this person's a vampire. Don't want to talk to them. Find a way to avoid them. And over time, because we are leaning into the strategy to overcome our fear, we diminish our muscle to be with stuff. So again, all of that stuff is unnecessary because I'm afraid I've created this story that it's not okay for me to kind of at some point in the conversation say, hey, it's been great talking to you, and I'm going to move on, and I want to go talk to some other people. We have a story that's not okay. That's okay. You're allowed to talk to other people. Because we've got so much fear built up about it, when we first start practicing this, we're incredibly awkward and clumsy, and we tend to be rude from our clumsiness and our awkwardness. But if you're willing to keep practicing this, you can become very artful. Hey, it's cool. I love hearing about what you're up to. There's some other people I want to go chat to at this party. Or, hey, you're awesome. It's been really nice talking to you. I just want to go and sit with my thoughts for a little bit. Those are totally acceptable ways to bring something to the table, but we have a story that's not okay. And from that, we learn to avoid people. And therefore, we never practice leaving the conversation artfully. And then we get more afraid of the consequence of not leaving the conversation artfully. So then we get even more fixated on finding the vampires. And over time, more and more people start to look like vampires. More and more people are people we tend to avoid. And we get better and better and better at empowering, not connecting with other people. And then someone says, you're an introvert. And we go, oh my God, I am. Thank you so much for seeing me. And what we never realize is what people are seeing is the strategy of our fear. They're not seeing who you are down here. They're seeing the strategies you've learned to adopt. And it feels great, but it's not really who you actually are. It's confirming who you've learned to relate to yourself as, which is totally different. So that is important because it lays the foundation for what there actually is to do. Yeah, Alexandra, I appreciate you sharing that. And I also really honor you for bringing that as such a valuable conversation. So what there is to do, how do we practice with this is we practice with both sides of it. We notice, first of all, we drop the idea of like, I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert. Because what people tend to do with those labels is they get them and they're like, oh, I'm an introvert. I don't have to do X, Y, and Z, and the world needs to meet me here as an introvert. So it becomes this fixed object that I am, and it's now the world's responsibility to meet me that way, or I just hold them at bay. Not a lot of possibility down that road. So instead, the first step is to start to recognize, oh, who I am is connection. And introversion or extroversion, and most likely ambiversion, as they're calling it these days, which is really clumsy and awkward. That's really like the admission of the failure of this distinction. It's like, You're either one of these two, unless you're not, in which case you'll just be all of them. And it's just like, no, that's not working. So we start by saying, oh, who I am is connection. And when one of these two things show up, what's really there is that I'm afraid. I'm afraid to embrace the totality of who I am. And then from there, the opportunity is to choose back into simply being connection. So when we notice we're being glib and funny and charming, but there's not really any of our humanity there, we drop into connection. We slow down and we just trust like, oh, what if who I am is enough? What if I'm already connected with this person and all this extra stuff on top is actually in the way? And when we notice we're in a conversation where we're like, fuck, I'm afraid to stay with this person, I want to withdraw, we have two choices. One is we can just be like, okay, I'm afraid, but what if I leaned into that fear? And what if I just connected with this person a little more deeply for another 5 minutes? And then it's not about just sitting here like this. Yeah, that's cool. You and your mom did. Oh my goodness, that's not what we're doing. It's like, okay, I've got 5 more minutes and I'm going to practice. How deeply can I connect with this person for 5 more minutes? And then on the other side of giving the gift of our connection, we say, hey, it's been great. And I'm going to move on now. Thanks for sharing all that with me. It's been really fun getting to know you. That's a really beautiful gift to give someone. I want to read what you wrote here, Andrew. Alexandra, thank you so much for bringing that topic. So juicy. We got some more people here. So if you're one of these 13, put your name over there. Tell us where you're from. Where are you from? What's your stupid name or your awesome name? Bring yourself into the space. I want to say hi. Andrew says, it sounds like a dating scenario where in this case, the man needed an excuse to leave the bathroom. Needed an excuse to leave and the bathroom is it. Yeah, totally. We're afraid to be honest with each other. And the thing is that if I'm in a conversation with someone and I'm finding them boring, first of all, there's like one opportunity for me to practice would be, hey, boredom is a product of me not generating something here, as opposed to a lack of stimulation over there. That's one opportunity. But let's say I really am just, I've talked to this person and I'm now ready to move on. Because we're afraid to do that, we then sort of compensate like, I must stay. I don't want to hurt this person's feelings because the thought is hurtful. So then we stay. And then what people do is because they force themselves over to this inauthentic place, they then swing out to radical authenticity as the practice. So then they're like, great, I'm no longer going to do that. I'm going to let people know they're fucking boring when it's time to leave. And that doesn't really work either. So there's a place to find authenticity without brutality. And that's where we want to go, right? So it's like the most honest thing might be like, I'm bored, fuck these people, I hate your face, and I don't like the belt you're wearing. And that would all be true, but that might not be what's going to create art with the moment. And perhaps the simple thing would be to share like, hey, it's been nice to get to know you, or even to hear the sound of your voice, or I appreciate you sharing what you shared with me, and now I'm going to move on. That can be true too, and we can share a truth from that place. Hey, Amber, welcome. I think we just became friends. It's nice to have you here. Uh, Amber, it sounds like you might be the way I would call it is someone learning to embrace the connection that she is, as opposed to a recovering introvert. So I'm just going to read a section from this book, The Spectrums of Being. This is no longer the title of this book. So this is the Alpha edition that got published, where we talk a lot about this stuff. And I've casually deep. I love that, Alexandra. Hey, Vera, welcome. Nice to have you with us. This has grown into a massive book. It's 400 pages, a big reference, very juicy. And hopefully people are willing to pick that up. And if not, well, then I'll have to edit it again. But the title is shifted as I've worked on this. It's now called Who Do You Think You Are? What the mirror doesn't show you about leadership. And ultimately, it's all of this kind of content, seeing the truth of the person there. And I just want to share with you, Amber, so we have 25 qualities of being. There's millions, but we're distinguishing 25, and the common shadows. And the common shadows listed for connection are the overcompensating side of connection is superficial and exhausted. Hey, LA. And the undercompensating side is cold and isolated. So that's the introvert side, and then the overcompensating looks to us like extroversion. If anyone does not yet have an alpha edition and would like one, what you have to do is you don't have to worry about paying anything. You just have to send me a Facebook message and say, yo, I'd love to have that book. And then I'll mail, you got to send me your address and then I'll send you one free of charge. We still have some to go out. LA, you should have gotten yours by now. I'm not sure if you did or not, but I put it in the mail to you. So you should be getting it. Okay. Good topic. Andrew, I'm just going to read what you wrote. In that piece I read from Straight Line Leadership, this book right here, you said it's a common theme to say we can't do something. However, there is really no excuse in that anymore as we have an abundance of access to any resource we need. It's a matter of trusting ourselves to be able to find those resources and implement them. Yes, and so the only thing that I would kind of switch in this is that very quickly someone could then make, you could take this distinction and have it be choosing to versus trusting myself to. And then we could say, oh, the new thing is that I don't trust myself enough yet. So let me develop the trust in myself, and then I'll choose to do the thing. And so the opportunity really, I'm going to stand rigorously for that distinction as it is, because throughout all of us, it's really, we don't even need to trust ourselves. We just need to choose to do the thing. And if we're willing to choose to do the thing, then the work necessary to trust yourself to do that thing will make itself known. Once you've made the decision, that other stuff, whatever's in the way, is going to come to the forefront and you're going to get to work on it. One of the things that's neat about this is when people come to me looking to hire a coach, their first question is like, great, so what's the logistics? What's it look like? See you, Wilson. Peace, man. What's it look like? What's it cost? Or they're like, well, I know I need a coach. I want to hire a coach. And I'm like, great, why? They're like, leadership, right? Something vague, broad, whatever. And my job is to have them actually get clear on a declared result that they're committed to creating. What do you want to make happen that leadership would serve you in creating? Why work with a coach? And what most people are stuck on is like, I need the structure. I need to hire someone so that I'm better, without actually getting clear on what they want to make happen. And so that's a challenging conversation. Most people will be like, well, I don't know. They don't know the answer. What do you want to charge? How many clients do you want to have? You know, if we're talking to a coach, what do you want to have in a year's time? I don't know, like a community of people and a nice client roster. Great. How many people? And then they tend to get stuck on like, well, I don't know. And they're trying to figure out the answer rather than declare and choose an answer. Great, I want 10 clients. That's my declaration. And I want to be paid $100,000. And we resist declarations like that because we're afraid we won't make them. But by resisting making a declaration towards something we don't yet know how to create, we actually ensure we never aim ourselves towards that. And instead, what ends up happening is people try to get supported doing their best. And doing their best is fine, but it's also, there's not a lot of power in that because you're always doing your best. It's when we make a clear declaration, a line in the sand, I am committed to creating this result, that then that stuff's going to start to show up. That's the power of choosing something. All right, let's see what else we got here. Oh, I liked your question, Andrew, which was, close that, have a look here. Supporting people, you said clients, I'm going to say supporting people when they're in a state of apathy or indecision. Andrew's sharing his tendency is wanting to push, to go, to make a decision now, like make it happen. And it's been a challenge to reach the end of the call with very little action or even confusion by the end. And it also feels deflating and also new for you. So love new places to be. So in the conversation about supporting people, there's a bunch of ways we can support people. And I'm going to talk about a specific one, but I'll lay out some groundwork first. You can support people by shouting at them until they do a thing, which may or may not, it'll support them in one way, and it'll also keep them stuck in another way. You can support people by saying, I'm never going to make you do anything. And that's going to support people in one way, and it's going to not support them in another way. You can support people by giving them all the answers. You can support people by not giving them the answers. You can support people by being a cheerleader. Millions of ways. In terms of a conversation about developing leadership, which is to say, developing people's ability within themselves to show up and be the cause of what gets created in their life. So that means that if you were to develop my leadership, it means I am better able to make the stuff I say I want in my life happen in my life. That's all I mean when I'm talking about leadership. And so if we're talking about supporting people in service of developing their leadership, often what the work is to do is not to force them to get anywhere. It is simply to help them see the way they're showing up, to help them see how they're showing up so they can then see whether or not that's working for them. So typically, well, what Andrew's talking about are people that the way they show up in their life is either apathetic or indecisive, which both of those are kind of like a way of showing up into your life where you don't actually choose anything, right? If I'm apathetic, what's the point? Why would I choose anything? Or I'm indecisive. Either way, I'm sort of sitting on a fence. Maybe slightly different experiences in those two places. Indecisive can feel very like frenetic and like and like a vice around your head or something along those lines. And apathetic can feel very just what's the point? It can almost feel like people describe depression, like you're just a flat line. What's the point of anything? But they're both kind of similar ways of getting stuck, which is that we just don't make any choice in our life. And so in terms of supporting people to create something beyond that, all there really is to do is to point to that, to point to like, hey, I notice, you've said you want, well, if they show up and they're like, help me, we're like, okay, what do you want? They're like, I don't know. Great. Seems like that's going to get in the way. If you just aren't even willing to declare anything that you don't want, that's probably going to make it hard for you to get anything. You're probably going to bounce around life a bit like a billiard ball. You're going to bounce off of stuff and end up. And then what people tend to do in that way of being is like make the best of where they ended up, right? Oh, I got hit in that way. Now I'm careening over here. Oh, bounced off of that. Okay, here I am. Where have I ended up? All right, here, there's that thing's here. I've got this stick here. That's kind of cool. I guess I'll empower that. So it's kind of like life by accident. And then the options in life by accident are be a victim to it, resent the life you end up with, or empower the life by accident, which is like, well, I got this piece of wood, but I made it into like a kind of a cool stool. And then I also found this, so I made like a diphthong, which is nice. I like diphthong. That's not a diphthong. You get the idea. A wibbly wob. So I guess this is cool. And then we empower that life that we've created, which is totally fine. It's just that there's a limitation to it, right? Life by accident gets you whatever you can accidentally get in your life. And then beyond that, your choices are either be a victim to it or be empowered by it, the end. So at this juncture, I'm going to take a moment to say this is what a lot of people end up doing when they talk about surrender projects. Michael Singer's book, The Surrender Experiment, very popular, very great book. But this is how most people take on surrender. They're just like, they're saying yes to a life by accident because it frees them of the burden, or at least the responsibility of a life by design. Life by accident, very different from life by design. So for these people that show up apathetic or indecisive or whatever, all there really is to do is to say like, hey, I notice, it seems like you're just sort of spinning around or sitting there in the center, and how's this going for you? Oh, it's not. Okay, great. Do you want something different? Yeah. Okay, great. What do you want? I don't know. Okay, well, it seems like you actually don't want something different because I don't know is part of the same game. Like you're going to have to choose something, or I don't see how you're going to get out of this. Do you see a way that this is going to go differently? Now, I'm not telling them they won't be able to get out of it. I'm just offering that I don't see any other way for this to go. And I'm inviting them, if they see some other way this is going to happen, great. Okay, what do you see? Well, I was hoping you might tell me what I need to do. And then if that's the case, I might look at that with them. Got it. Has that ever happened before? Oh, yeah, totally. How did it go? It was perfect. I did this and then I was excited. Okay, but now you're back here. So what led you back to this same, like obviously it didn't solve it. What led you back here? What we want to do is draw out the cycle so they can see the whole way that this shows up in their life, because only then can they really, with conscious, sober eyes, make a decision outside of it. So that's what there is to do when people are indecisive, apathetic, is just reflect that to them and then let them choose it. And some people are going to be like, well, I really think that if I just do this a little longer, or I really think I just need to find someone to like shout at me enough, and then I'm going to create my life. We can't, only they can bankrupt that. So for some people, they never will. Their karma, so to speak, is that they do that pattern for the rest of their life. And eventually they empower it enough. It's not giving them the life of everything they want, but they resign themselves to the life that they have decided they are capable of getting, and then they empower that resignation. That's what a lot of people do, and that's okay. Some people are going to bankrupt this. They're going to come back to you and be like, "Hey, fuck it. I went and found someone. He shouted at me every day. They screamed in my face, and I'm back here, and it didn't work, and I'm tired of this." And that's where the opportunity is for something different to happen. Our job is to stand outside of getting into the weeds with them and doing whatever it is that they're inviting everyone else in their life to do with them. And instead just keeping like, hey, there's a different possibility out here, but I'm not going to step into that game with you. It's worth noting that people don't tend to love that. People want us to collude with them unwittingly. We're not aware of it. You and you, this guy right here, we all want everyone to collude with us, buy into my story. Do the thing that I've already concluded is what I need to have done to me to solve the problem that I'm clear is what's at stake here. That's what's happening with all of us. So coaching and leadership development can be quite uncomfortable because people aren't stepping into that with us. They're actually standing out. And often that can feel a little bit like, fuck you. What's your problem? Andrew, those would be great things to do. Absolutely. Yeah. And, there's a point where they're going to have to either choose something different or not. So when people are just like, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, there is a point, and only you can really get clear for yourself. This just comes from practice, but there's a point where you have to be like, okay, great. Well, no one can tell you what you want, but you. I wrote a piece on this. There's two things that I will suggest. One is I wrote a piece on this. Let me find the link to it. A story called Your Relationship to Possibility about a guy named Ephraim. And Ephraim finds a magic lamp. He's a lawyer who goes antique shopping and discovers a lamp, magic lamp. Oh, so cool. And the genie comes out and is like, da 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 da. And the trouble is that Ephraim is being asked what he wants to wish for. Here, I'm going to put it in the comments here. But he's skeptical and just asking the genie, like, what should I wish for? And the genie's like, why are you asking me? That's so weird. So that's just kind of the game people get into. They get stuck in I don't know. And there's a point where we just have to say, look, you're going to have to make a choice or you're just going to stay here. And either one of those is fine. And our work, the hard work is for us over here to kind of like get ourselves to the point where we can really love people exactly there. Great. This is the place you're at. Oh, and the other thing was I have a infographic called The Secret Hope. And the secret hope is this distinction I created where there's a way people are showing up in their life, like a cycle, and the secret hope is this wish, this hope we have that if I just keep doing this enough, something's going to happen. There's something that'll happen, and then it'll all be different. And the secret hope is part of what keeps whatever the cycle that we're in our life, and we're all in a cycle of some sort, it's what keeps it going. Is we're just like, well, I'm maybe just this one time, maybe if this happened, and so for people that are like, I don't know, the secret hope is often like a thunderbolt from Zeus is going to strike them right in the forehead, and then they'll be like, I know. That's the secret hope. Or that they'll hire someone to scream at them, and then they'll do the thing, and they'll be totally empowered by it. That'd be fucking weird. So you can also, if you go back to that resources page, sign up. You'll get the secret hope is there, and that might be a place to look as well. Good topics. Okay, I want to talk about Robin's topic because she sent me this back a couple of weeks ago, but we had our live coaching. So I love what Robin sent me, which is she was sharing in her house. He's back. Welcome back, Evan. Back. Robin sent me She said, we have a livening discussion in our household that locking our chickens up at night to keep out the raccoons and possibly hooligans is based on fear. And she's saying, I believe it's based on a personal responsibility to keeping the chickens safe. My husband believes it's based on fear. And then so I then came back and argued that, well, drinking less alcohol is better for your body. And so there's less of a chance it causes cancer. But I could also say this is based on fear. And so are we being fearful in our decisions? Where do we draw the line between this being fearful and not feeling where I am? And, how do we decide what's the right answer? So first thing that is very important for you to mention is to acknowledge some of my own edge in this. Um, Part of the edge I'm always on, or at least I feel I'm often, not always, but I'm often, it's a fear I often lap and the strategy around fear. So I get to this place where I'm like, on the one hand, there's a truth I feel. Like, here is the truth that's here for me, and I want to put it into the space. And on the other hand, I'm like, and yet I don't want to be arrogant and be right over having a relationship with someone. I don't want to just push my righteous opinion onto people. And how do I know if I can even trust my righteousness? Because sometimes I get so right and stuck in it that then I miss the greater opportunity, the next possibility for me. And so you can imagine from those two places, you can just go back and forth endlessly. And the conversation becomes, well, is this fear-based or is this like my deepest truth? Or is this fear-based or is this my deepest truth? So I want to honor that that's like some of my work in this conversation. It's not like I've got an answer. It's something I'm always working with. Thanks, Andrew. I loved the conversation with Lee too. He's really awesome. He asked about the forge too, which is exciting. I think he would love that. And um, I just love the people that we have that are curious or saying yes to the structure of the forge because I think it's really magical. And yeah. Evan, can you elaborate on what you'd love to hear more about my righteousness in the world? I'm more than happy to share about it. I just want to make sure I'm not just blah, blah, blah righteousness. I want to get it a little more concrete. So let me know and then I'm happy to share about that. So I don't know to what extent the conversation, is this fear-based, is helpful, is the first thought I have. Because I can hang out there and have a very intellectual argument with myself or with you or with anyone forever. And that context seems a bit circular, right? It gets a little sticky, and it's also the kind of context, that's the conversation people get in uh, when they're trying to do it all on their own, right? When we're trying to best our own ego, we're like, is this fear-based? And then, yes, okay, then I should choose something different, or no, then I should blah, blah, blah. So a couple of things that are important to mention. First of all, there's nothing wrong with a decision based out of fear. That's hard for most of us to own. And Robin shares in her question, what did you say? Maybe we're both fearful, but don't want to be labeled fearful as that occurs as wrong to me. So that's part of the challenge here is we hold that any decision made from our fear rather than our deeper, more trusting, highest self, fear is wrong and highest self is better. But that's not true. That's fabricated. That's one more belief that's a belief that gets created in the transformational world. That's a belief that gets created in the leadership coaching conversation that is a bit toxic. And so part of what we do in my line of work with people is get clear on both who they truly are and on their survival mechanism, the stuff, their shadows, if you like, the stuff they've learned to do, the strategies they've learned to run that keep them stuck. And then what people immediately do is they vilify the shadows and they lionize the light. And it's like, if I'm light, I'm amazing. And if I'm shadow, I'm a piece of crap. And what do you think that biases them towards relating to themselves? That's a weird way I ask that. But just imagine, like, what do you think that would naturally bias them to see? And how would they tend to look at the way they're showing up from that perspective? And I'm just going to give you the answer because I felt pretty clumsy asking that question. But what that's going to bias them towards is, oh, this is what I'm doing is not fear-based. Because fear-based means I'm a piece of crap. So I'm naturally going to look for the places in my life where I'm not a piece of crap. unless you tend to be the other way, in which case you're like, the underlying story about me is I'm a piece of crap, so most of what I do is fear-based, and I know and I suck, whatever. But either way, that scours the lens. It makes it hard for us to see this kind of truth. So um, the I don't want to word this. The opportunity, I think, is like, who cares? Let's just drop the conversation about whether it's fear-based or not. And instead, let's ask the question, what do we want to create here? So what I want to create here is safe chickens. Great. What contributes to that? Would locking them up contribute to that? Or would they be safer not being locked up? What I want to create is knowing I'm doing the best for my body. Great. What's the level of alcohol that would meet that commitment versus what wouldn't? So notice this is not, we don't worry about, is this coming from fear? Is this coming from here or whatever? Instead, we're putting our attention on where we want to go. We are putting our attention onto the life that we want to design, to bring it back to where we started, as opposed to like whether there's a right way for me to show up, which gets you really in the weeds, gets you really like, you're looking at this nuance that doesn't need to be there. And instead, that just keeps you spinning around this little space. Instead of like, what am I committed to creating? And by the way, if what you're committed to creating is something scary, then one of the ways your fear wins is by having you get stuck on this little tiny game right here. I mean, like, but what if, but what if? And meanwhile, this scary thing that you said you want to create never gets looked at, never gets made happen. So really the game we want to look at is, what is the result that I want to make happen? And it's okay if it's fear-based or whatever. The real reason we would distinguish a particular way of showing up in your life as fear-based is not to vilify it or make it wrong, but because those things tend to be automatic. Those things tend to reside in our blind spots. And because of that, it's hard for us to notice them. And because it's hard to notice them, it's hard to see when the automatic go-tos for us are blocking us from creating the thing that we say we truly want. So that's where I would put that conversation, Robin. It's almost like, maybe it is fear-based. Maybe I don't drink because I'm afraid of getting cancer, and that's okay. Am I empowered by that choice? If that decision to not drink because I don't want to get cancer empowers me, then who cares if it's fear-based or because Jesus told me to do it or because I smelled the lavender during the start of spring and that gave me, none of it really matters. If a particular belief serves you to move towards where you want to get in your life, awesome. And if that belief is now in the way of where you want to get into your life, maybe it's time for a new belief. So that's the answer to that one. Really great question. I love that you're having that discussion in your house. So cool. Good philosophical conversation. Let's see what you got here, Evan. So you find that there are times when I give you guys, y'all, a peek at my opinions, feelings, objections, and it's quite refreshing. Then you reel it in or bite your tongue a little, and I guess you just want to feel more of me, even if it's a bit unpolished or wrong or righteous. But I can totally see that as a projection from my same struggle too. Yeah, so I'll share a little bit about my righteousness because I've got some thoughts on doing your work here, which is a good place for me to share some of that. And the funny thing is that your experience of me kind of reeling it in, biting my tongue, is insight into me. That's kind of the irony a little bit, is like internally, I'm like, is this okay to share? Is this too raw? What's the truth that I could share that would actually create what I'm committed to versus the truth of my anger in this moment versus the truth of my righteousness? And I'm not saying that to dismiss what you're asking for. I'm going to meet you there, but I also want to honor a little bit like I am in that calculus, and the thing you're experiencing is a little bit like, yeah, that is part of what's going on internally. That being said, so my friend Kendra Kunov is a masterful teacher. I hold her in very high regard, love her dearly. I gave her the name of Galadriel because I often experience her as sort of, if you ever watch Lord of the Rings, when Frodo comes to Galadriel and offers her the ring, there's sort of this otherworldly, heavenly, spiritual kind of, there's a magnificence to Galadriel that's almost humbling. And Anyhow, so I hold Kendra in very high regard. I think she's doing beautiful work. And we have, I don't know if we have a difference of opinion on this. I think we probably come down very similarly, but like all things, even the closer you are to something, the more the distinction can become visible, especially if you're like really close. And so she wrote a post the other day that was like, I don't think every coach needs to have a coach. So I'm just finding my way in this conversation. But first of all, when I read that, I have an immediate reaction. And the immediate reaction is sort of informed or a product of what I see largely in the coaching profession. Bonsoir, Alexandra. Thanks for being here. Real treat to be with you. Appreciate your questions. When I look at the broad brushstrokes of the coaching profession, and especially what I see in social media, what I'm more present to, rather than people selling people the possibility of their lives fully expressed, I see people selling money. What I mean by that is they're like, make six figures, or here's how you can have easy leads to blah, 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 which is code for here's how you can make more money to then do that thing you want. So it's always the money is the priority. There's a lot of ultimately internet marketers selling you internet marketing. I'm going to help you internet market and then calling it coaching. And that fucking pisses me off. That really drives me nuts. That's like if you ever want to get in an argument with me, or if you're like, I wonder if maybe I'll rile Adam up today just for fun, you could like just bring this up, get into this conversation with me. So from that, like if I look at that as I would, my rough estimate, purely gut shot intuition is about 80% of the profession. Maybe we'll say 70, maybe even 60% of that, the profession is that. 20% of the profession is like um, people really wanting to create something. They want to do coaching without any of the commitment to doing the work themselves. So they're they're like they want to be committed, but they're not willing to. And that's our fear winning out. So it's not like they're wrong for it, even though they piss me off. And the pissing off is because I don't have a lot of space for myself to, to let my fear win. I don't have much space for that. But nevertheless, it's that 20% where they're kind of dipping their toe in, and then they're from dipping their toe in, they're trying to enroll other people, and then they're like, coaching's hard, creating clients is hard, and then that bottom 60% I just referred to markets to these 20% people because they're like, getting clients is hard. It's actually not once you're committed, because once you're committed, you can really stand for other people to commit to their lives. You're present to the power of it. But as long as you're dipping your toe into something and not willing to commit, it's really damn hard to get people to commit. So the coaching is hard, getting clients is hard, selling is hard is a function of their unwillingness to make that commitment rather than anything else. The story that it's hard and how they show up from their story is the thing in their way, not the truth of their story. And then you have the top 20% that is like the people really committed, fucking committed to this work. I invest in myself. I do my work, regardless of what that looks like. And at that top 20%, that work can look any number of ways. It doesn't have to be a coach. It might be like deep recovery work, or it might be therapeutic work, or it might be working with a bunch of teachers. And I hold some standards for this profession. And the standards I hold are like, some people will be like, well, Adam, that's your story. For me, it's not coaching, it's deep therapeutic work to really work with my trauma. And I'm like, great, but I don't know if your trauma is stopping you from really being present in the moment. I don't know then that you're at a place where you should be talking to people about creating possibility in their lives because you yourself are not yet able to be present. Do that work and then look into coaching, then take on what's next, right? The trouble with all of this that I'm sharing is like, and this is how I can get with my coach, I can see a counterpoint to this. I was a good lawyer. I can always see a counterpoint. But that's what my righteousness says. It's like, do your fucking work first, man. Go, great. Do the therapy. Take on your trauma. Really address that. Can you please get that handled to some level of ability to just be fully present and not have that be the thing in the way of you designing your life. If therapy is something that's there for you, can you find a way to create the both and if not, why are you standing for other people to work with a coach when you yourself are not yet willing to do that? Well, because for me the path is therapy. Great, stand for other people to take that therapeutic path. Like, it's either a both and it's all possible, or you're using this as an excuse to not commit to the thing that you say you want other people to commit to. That pisses me off. And from my higher self, I can see, like, you know, there's two parts of me here, Evan, and this is important for me to say, is that the anger part of me is very righteous and doesn't really have much space to see the bigger picture. From the bigger picture, I can really see, like, people are trying their best and they're trying to put this onto the table. They're trying to, like, find their way in the dark, so to speak. What I don't love about Kendra's post is that I don't know who the market or the audience for that is, but what I'm present to is that 80% of the coaching profession reads that and uses it to validate and justify where they are. So instead of that being something that opens up possibility, the vast majority read it and are like, yeah, what I'm doing is fine. This is good enough. I am on my work. Which on the one hand is really, like, great, it validated people and that's important. But on the other hand, I'm like, fuck, call people forward to something greater than whatever. I want to be really clear that this is all kind of reactive. I'm trying to put my reactive thinking on loudspeaker. I can read Kendra's post and see much more. Like, I'm not asserting that this is what she's intending or saying. I'm trying to give my honest reaction as a truth here that is, that has been asked for. Let me read what you guys have said. Andrew's saying, from my experience, I found that I felt like I was still creating an impact without having a committed coach. It wasn't until I saw that at times the work wasn't that impactful that I really saw I was doing a disservice. I could provide the roadmap, but it was still surface level. It really wasn't until being in the course with you that there were deeper levels to all of this. It's a little bit like placebo. Placebo effect is if you give someone a sugar pill and you tell them, if you take this, it's going to make you better. And then they take it, and their belief that this will have them get better heals them. And so there's this argument in between skeptical, critical thinking and scientifically minded medicine and holistic, homeopathic, the more fringy medical, if we call them that, or like self-help or whatever, communities. There's this argument, and the argument is, look, if the placebo makes them better, why do you got to be a dick about it? I'm not being too charitable, but that's roughly the idea. Like, hey, if the placebo helps them, let it be that. And the critical thinking, skeptical communities are like, because that's dishonest, and because if we open the gates to that, where is the line at all? And this is what I see in a lot of the coaching professions. People are like, well, what I do helps people. And it's like, yeah, sure it does. Even just being willing to get on the phone with someone and give them advice, or like sit with them and listen. If you had no training at all and were just committed to showing up for an hour every week and sitting with people and saying, I love you at the end of every sentence, that would have an impact with people. That would help people. It's not coaching, at least not as far as what I assert coaching is and what the bodies of, like, the organizational bodies that are trying to hold a space for coaching say is coaching. And if we just open the gates for it to be everything, what's even the fucking point? Right? If it's all coaching, if you selling Beachbody products to someone is the same thing that I'm providing, then we're just a wash. And where we're left is chaos and sort of a wealth of opinion, but it doesn't really create anything. So the distinctions matter. And this is why when people are like, but I'm helping people, I'm impactful, that kind of frustrates me. And then the work for me, just to step out of kind of reactive and to a little bit of a higher point, the work for me is to separate the righteous indignation that shows up for me, the fuck you for fucking with my shit. That's what shows up. I'm like, this is my world. This is something that matters more to me than anything else in life. Fuck you and your stupid fucking face and your opinions. Fuck off. the work for me is to separate that angry part, do the work to allow that to dissipate so I can still stand for this underlying truth I'm talking about, which is there is an importance and a value to this profession. There's an importance and a value to this work. There's an importance and a value to having coaching be distinguished as a thing and to inviting them into that thing rather than just saying it's all magical, wonderful coaching. And whether you're taking a placebo sugar pill or you're getting a vaccine for COVID, it's all good and we don't need to bother distinguishing any of it. Okay, Evan, did that satisfy? Is that kind of what you want? I can vent for longer, although personally I find venting is toxic for me because I just get angrier and more righteous and I just tend to spiral down. I just tend to hang out there. So even though it's really compelling for me, I do a lot of work to try to step out, to hold space for that part of me that wants to be there, but then to step out and choose something different. So I don't just stay in that toxic pool of sludge. You said, Evan, it's insanely infuriating. You jokingly tell people you got into coaching to do it properly and show people how it's done. Yeah, same. That's your righteousness. I tell people, and it's not even a joke, it's true. I got into this work to tell people how to live their lives correctly because I believed I'd figured it all out. Andrea, you say, where's that point for the both and? Is there a point where they can check the box of therapy trauma has been dealt with and they're good to go? Well, sure, right? There has to be. But for me, it's not really, I don't have therapy and coaching as separate. Well, I have them as distinct from one another. And so if I've talked to lots of coaches where they're a mess and most of their work lies in the realm of the therapeutic, but they don't want to come to terms with that. And instead they want to be a coach because that's sexier. Coaching's like, yeah, I'm creating what's next. Hell yeah. To really start to create what's next, you got to get your life in order first. Like if you're living paycheck to pay, or like if you're not sure where your next meal is going to come from, that's a pretty challenging place to then start to coach people with. Like we got to get basic well-being handled. We got to get basic needs met. That should be the ground level. That should be the entry point for coaching. It's not. There's no barrier to entry. But I assert that's the ground level. Like you got to be reliable to generate income regularly. You got to be reliable to eat. If you haven't brushed your teeth for 2 weeks, get that handled. Woman, girl, what was that book? Girl, wash your face, right? Like get this shit done. I only know the title of that book, so I apologize if I'm misusing it. And I myself have done recovery work. I've done therapeutic work. Like I don't do these in exclusion. There's room for me to get supported therapeutically and then to continue working with my coach. So for people that are like, hey, I got therapeutic work, great, take that on. And there is something that coaching provides that therapy doesn't. And so when you want to start holding this clearing for other people to step into coaching with you, I assert that there's a call there for you to step into your own coaching work. And you can do that alongside getting the therapeutic support. You can do that alongside going to recovery meetings. A lot of the most profound coaches I know actively are in recovery. They don't have to recover and then be completely done with their addiction for like 10 years sober before they can start to hold the space for someone. So remember, the foundation for me in this is that we must be a work in progress and we must be progressing in our work. We're a work in the progress in the sense that we are not finished, complete, done. We admit and own that we have edges and we're taking them on and progressing in our work. We are working with people to support us doing that. Andrew, you say, it's why I've really enjoyed the process of allowing people to experience coaching rather than explaining the concept of it. Yes, there's something truly magical about a coaching conversation. Hell yes. Yeah, there really is. I mean, that's the experience that gets created, right? Therapy and coaching. Yeah. Here's what I find is most of us are resistant to recovery work because recovery work well, first let's take one step back. Most of us are resistant to the idea that there is a level of attainment that can be achieved in my life, a level of expression, a level of achievement, a level of attainment, a level of whatever you want to call it. There's a level of existence and experience that can be attained in my life that I can only reach through the support and allowance of other people in. as opposed to doing it all on my own. So that's our starting point. Most of us are resistant to that because I'm weak. It means I suck. If I let people see me, I'm not enough. Doing it by yourself is the king, the best way, all of that bullshit. From that initial starting point, a crack starts to get formed initially. Maybe some people can help me be a little bit better. And from there, and from that starting point, we're a little more open to the possibility of coaching than we are to therapy or more importantly, recovery work. And the reason is coaching is like where you are is amazing and where you could be is even more amazing. So the starting point there is don't worry, you're amazing. Whereas recovery is almost like, hey, where you are is bankrupt. Your best work, your best thinking got you here, and it's not working. You're at a bottom. So it's easier for us to admit that, yeah, where I am is amazing and I can go further than it is for us to admit I'm at a bottom and my own strategies are bankrupt. And I can't create something beyond this without some support from others and from God, spirit, universe, whatever your rendition of spirit or God is. And so what tends to happen is people get into coaching work first. That's their first stop, and start to do some work. Hopefully start to work with a coach. And hopefully if that coach is really a stand for them, they slowly start to get present to the therapeutic and the recovery work that's there for them to take on. And then they choose into that. And that's when things really start to shift. So often the path is we first we're just resistant to all of it. Then we allow space for transformation to happen. Transformation allows us to start getting into some form of recovery or therapeutic work. And that then feeds into the transformation. And then you get this virtuous cycle. Just starts to scale out bigger and bigger. Okay, you didn't respond, Evan, but I hope that kind of I'm happy to elaborate on all of this stuff. It's interesting because in my group of friends, we the way this plays out there is the political conversation, which tends to be more about the state. The Canadian political system's less interesting, and in my opinion, less messed up, less logger jammed, and so sometimes that conversation can feel to me a little like sometimes my friends are like, hey, I'd rather you share your opinion and put yourself in the space, and I get that, I really get that request, and then there's this other side of me. It's like I'm trying really hard not to just fall into the righteous, indignant conversation that's very easy for me to get into of what a fucker. And like, here's how they're a fucker and they're a fucker this way and fuck that. All of that is just readily accessible. And I'm very well acquainted with how easy it is for me to get into that whirlpool. So I'm often trying to choose something different in service of my greater commitment. Okay, well, let's have a look here. We got time for at least one more topic. We talked about connection. That was rad. Remember when we talked about that? Super good. We talked about supporting apathy and indecision. Knocked that one right out of the park. We talked about fear-based decisions. Commitment and surrender. Yes. Who wrote this one? Oh, there's that, and then there's also what Sharafat asked about, which is like, what? Okay, so let me hit Sharafat's because she asked this 2 weeks ago, and I needed elaboration. So Sharafat, maybe I can bring up your question here. No, I can't. I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's basically your question was like, what do I do when I'm down a path, I'm doing something, and I get bored? So it's like, hey, I'm committing to watching all of these videos, and then she starts watching the videos, and then I'm bored. I don't want to do this. So, or wherever that shows up in your life, which is very, actually, I notice this is a less common experience for me these days, but used to be really common, boredom, which then made rolling up and sparking up really compelling because you're not usually bored on pot. Burnt out, stuck in the couch, into couch after smoking that indica, but not usually too bored. So one of my leaders and Bay's current coach, a brilliant woman named Jody Jan Larson. I want to bring up her website just so you can get a vibe off of this woman. She is just amazing. Where are you, Jody? Do you have a webpage? Oh my God. Do you not have a webpage? Oh, she doesn't even have a webpage. That's crazy. Criminal. Criminal, I say. Anyhow, Jody Jan Larson, incredible woman. And I was asking, like, I'm bored. What do I do with the boredom? And she invited me into a stand, a way of a belief to try on, to wear, to come from. And the stand was that boredom is never it's never a function of a lack of stimulation. It is a function of a lack of generation. So what that stand does, what that belief does, is it changes me from being at the effect of my boredom to at cause for it. I'm going to elaborate what I mean by that. At the effect of it means like I'm bored, and in order to change my boredom, something externally needs to happen. I require more stimulation. There's nothing here that can be done to address the boredom. What's required is some candy or a joint or a beer or a new conversation or going out to the bar or bored, anything, right? And the interesting thing here is that all of those things seem kind of very empowered. Like, oh, look how at cause I am. Look at me not being a victim in my life. The boredom shows up and I do something about it. But fundamentally, you're still in it. The boredom is it's not your fault. It's a product of something out there. And so what do you do to solve it? You change your circumstances. To really be at cause in our life for the experience we're having is to live our life in such a way and with such a set of beliefs that we don't require our circumstances to change at all in order to have the experience of life that we are committed to having. Just like hold that for a sec. Consider that possibility. Imagine the possibility where how you experience your life and yourself and your surroundings is not at all a function of the circumstances of your life and your surroundings. The example I like to use for this in the leadership conversation is like the leader is able to, if they get told it's your day to use the special toothbrush we use to clean the urinals, they are able to have an experience cleaning those urinals that is consistent with the experience they want to have. So maybe they're like, I'm committed to finding a way to be inspired in this being my job. What is required from me? What belief, what interpretation do I need to take on and live from to really be empowered in cleaning out these urinals and making the cakes look nice and white and shiny? As opposed to, okay, I got to do this. Well, what I'll do is you know what? I'm going to get drunk and then I'll go do it. That'll make it more fun. Yeah, but you needed to inject something externally. You needed to change your circumstances to have that experience. So that's what this stand for boredom does, is it allows us to shift from this boredom is an external thing that I need to address externally to boredom is entirely an internal thing. And therefore the solution, the opportunity is to address it internally with my beliefs, my interpretations, my stand. And so from that place, we start to get to ask different questions, right? If boredom is produced externally, then the questions that are there for us to ask are all external ones. What could I do that would make this more fun? What needs to show up in my space to make this more fun? What could I do differently next time to not arrive here that I would like more? What activities do I need to choose into that don't look like this one that have me blah, 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 blah? So fundamentally, it's an at effect conversation. You're at the effect of your circumstances. Shift that, and the conversation gets to be like, how am I showing up that's leading to boredom? How am I relating to what's happening that's leading me to feel bored? What am I not willing to express in this moment that's leading to my boredom? What is my interpretation about this person, this conversation, this moment in my life that's causing boredom? That is a generative conversation. It has you go inwards and really start to take a look like, hey, who am I being that's leading to this experience of boredom? And how could I show up differently? What other opportunity, what other way of showing up into this moment might be available to me that would have me experience it as something other than boring? So that's a bit, we're getting kind of deep into the ontological roots of that conversation, but I think that that is a beautiful and really powerful way to relate to boredom. And I want to be absolutely 100% clear that that is a more demanding conversation. It demands more of you than the conversation where it's all externally created. Because if it's just externally created, all you got to do is go spark up, turn the TV on, eat some chips while you clean out the special urinals with the special toothbrush. I wouldn't recommend doing that, but you get the idea. The external conversation is solved by a pill, metaphorically speaking. Oh, I'm bored. I just need whatever the magic pill is. Now I'm not bored. But you haven't changed anything internally. You've just layered something new over top of it. The internal conversation is less satisfying in the short term. It takes more work. It requires a willingness to be responsible for the experience you're having rather than taking the nice off ramp off of that highway of responsibility, taking that nice off ramp to like, it's not my fault. I just got to figure out how to do stuff differently. I just got to change maybe with some pink lighting in this urinal zone. Then it'll be more interesting. Maybe some disco music. I'm being silly now. So that's what there is to do with boredom. That's how we work with it as a leader. That's how we shift from being at the effect of whatever's going on in our lives to at cause for our own experience in the face of whatever's going on in our lives. This is why often most of the strategies people adopt to try to create a breakthrough, they're like, I want to break through in abundance. And then the way they try to do that is just to like get a job where they're making more money. So it's all externally focused, right? Oh, I just got to go out there, get more money coming in, then I'll have an experience of abundance. It rarely works. And this is also why winning the lottery almost never leads to a different experience of life. All it really does is turn up the volume on your existing experience of life. That's the nature of changing your external circumstances. More money just increases the scale. If this is your experience of life, money just goes, there it is. Now it's bigger. It's louder. How is it? Doesn't really change much. Okay, we're going to finish up. Commitment and surrender, which is my man David's question, and then we're going to wind down. David asks, Adam, can you speak into your relationship to long-term vision, goals, milestones, while also being open to something new, a new outcome, not needing to know or figure out what's next? Does it go in phases? Can we create both ways always? So for me, this ultimately becomes a conversation about spirit, a relationship to spirit and trusting. But before we go there, I'll talk about like the two ways people tend to show up, the two ends of the spectrum. So from I want to make something happen, people end up either attached or resigned. I originally learned this distinction in accomplishment coaching. So from attached, it's like, I'm going to make $10,000 this month. And then they get into so much action and like they are hating themselves. They're doing absolutely everything. They're stealing money out of people's wallets. They're attached to that result, which can look a little bit like commitment, but the being underneath is very attached. There's no freedom. There's no spaciousness. There's just an absolute fixation. People often describe themselves when they're in this space like, I become an asshole. I get really intense. I get aggressive. I get blah, blah, blah. And because people don't like their experience of themselves in that place, they then go to the other end of this spectrum, which looks different, but is actually like, it comes around like that. They're both a function of a disempowered relationship to commitment and to spirit. So the other end, from attachment, we go to resignation. Resignation is kind of like the surrender we were talking about earlier. So resignation is, I want to make $10,000 and now I'm going to go back to doing whatever I'm doing. Oh, well, if it happens, awesome. And I declared it. It was powerful. I set an impossible goal and I'm going to make that happen. And that's cool. Anyhow, so now I'm going to go back to just doing what I'm doing and it'll be so cool when that happens. So there's no teeth to that, right? It's taking a coin and flipping it into a fountain and wishing. Yay. But who cares? There's no commitment in the wish you made on the fountain, at least in and of itself. So we go from attachment and like, I have to make this happen, to this really intense, aggressive experience for yourself, maybe for other people. And even if you create the result from that place, it's not the most empowered, to resignation, which is very common. People usually begin their journey at attachment, and then a lot of people, you see this a lot, it's very prevalent in the coaching profession when people are not particularly deep in their work, is they're They're creating a solution to the problem of their attachment, but without any actual distinguishing going on. And so they're like, they come up with fancy reframes like, I don't have projects or goals now, I have experiments, which becomes this resignation. And it's like, oh, I'm going to experiment towards this, but it's okay if I don't get it. Or I don't set goals, I have impossible goals. Or I don't ever coach this is a University of Santa Monica one. I don't coach the goal line, I only coach the soul line. So that's like coaching how someone's being, but there's never anything on the line for them. You never actually give it any teeth. You never have them draw a line in the sand and say, this is the result I want to commit and create from this change in my being. So then it just becomes, the conversation very much becomes like playing pool with no pockets. So you move the balls around the table and you're like, yeah, now the balls are in this configuration. That's different from last week when they're in that, but who fucking cares? I guess you could hit them again. It feels like you're making progress, but towards what? We don't have anything on the line. So attachment, resignation tends to be where we fluctuate back and forth from. I had a client, this is just an example of this showing up in a client who was a former Olympic rower. You may have heard me talk about this guy before. He's amazing. I love this man. But the place he really was stuck and couldn't move off of was that his history was he'd made it all the way to the finals in the Olympics. We have an amazing rowing team here in Victoria. Well, in Canada, our rowing team's exquisite, and they train literally in my backyard. So there's a hill right behind my house called Bear Hill, and then right behind that is a beautiful lake called Elk Lake and Beaver Lake. Sometimes I walk around and take my calls there, and that's where for the longest while, the Canada's national rowing team trains. I think we've lost that. I think that's actually moving on. But anyhow, that's where they train. And so he trained here. Anyhow, his team made it all the way to the finals in the Olympics, the finals, and then failed. They choked. And he was devastated. And some of, like, as you can imagine, some of the people turned to drugs. You know, it's just getting that far and then losing and just like, oh, it crushed them. So that's what happens with attachment, right? You get so fixated on the goal that when it doesn't come through, it blows you apart. And even if it does come through, it's like, you got it, but it's such a Pyrrhic victory. At what cost to myself? And so he was really like, I don't want to be that guy. He was really judgmental of who he had been in his attachment. And so from there, he'd created this whole life around never setting goals, not like he was a rowing coach, but he never coached people with anything but love. And he never set any goals. He never had people set goals. How do you want to experience this? So he was doing that thing where he was like only coaching the soul line. And in our conversations, he'd be like, I want a really good thriving practice. I'm like, great. What does that look like? Thriving. I feel love every day. Went, okay, great. And what kind of results? And he just he couldn't get off of that. So he was just all the way in this resigned space. Now, it's important that we make note here that resignation is not often experienced by people as a feeling of resigned. We can feel quite empowered around our resignation, which is what makes this so compelling. So he was empowered around his resignation. He just couldn't see that there is a level of attainment and creation that would not be arrived at absent this breakthrough. Doesn't mean he has to take it, but it's just that he was on this continuum and had learned this side I don't like that much, so this is the side I'm hanging out at. So that's where he was stuck. Not uncommon. And just to be clear, he was doing amazing things in the world. So it's not like this guy sucked or anything. He's up to awesome stuff. He's doing great stuff. There's just a breakthrough that he couldn't see and couldn't trust himself to get into. And we didn't have that long this is part of what happens when we only work for like 3 to 6 months, is you can just start to support people to see this stuff. But it often takes, like, the beauty of a year is people, they hit the bankruptcy point for it, where there's like, fuck, it's not working. I can't do it any longer. And then the breakthrough can really happen. So to David's question, so then what? Do we hang out in attachment and then run all the way over here? And what do we do? So for me, at least, the breakthrough that comes from this is in spirit. And the way that looks, I heard this initially just distinguished as commitment, but that's a bit sticky for people. So in terms of like approaching this with a relationship to spirit. It becomes not a it's a both and. So it allows for both our commitment and a relationship with spirit. And the way that looks for me is I make a declaration in my life because I'm clear that making declarations moves me towards something, even and especially when they terrify me. The easiest place for me to point to this is Bay and I run an intensive every year. It's a 4-day, it's been fucked by COVID. But every year, our commitment, especially once COVID ends, is that we have people come to this glorious city of Victoria and do intensive work. We create transformation with them for 4 days. Not inspiration, although that's there. Not information, although that's there too, but primarily transformation. The primary promise and aim of how we show up, who we be, and what you get from this work is you do not leave the same person you came in as. And what that does is it supports you to be a better leader, a better husband, a better wife, a better person in everything you're up to in your life. So the first year, we had about 20 people. The second year, before it got canceled by COVID, we were on track for about 30. And my commitment is that in 3 years time, we run 2 intensives a year with 150 people attending each of them. That's a terrifying commitment for me, just to be clear. I have no idea how to make that happen. That's not this line. That's this line. That's a whole different transformational line to get there. Who I can be about that is very attached. Or I can be really resigned. Fuck it, whatever. I'm just going to keep doing the same thing I always do, and hopefully it makes it happen. Or I can be attached and like calling people, and when they say no, like you're stupid. That's what my attachment looks like. Fuck you, idiot. Fine. Fuck off. But maybe you want to come next year. From a relationship and a breakthrough in spirit and having that in partnership with commitment, the way it looks is that I'm every bit as committed in my actions. I show up getting supported, calling people, inviting people, making content, everything I think I need to do, and then some in service of creating that result, and simultaneous and in partnership with that way of showing up in my own life, I release it over to spirit. I don't know how many people are meant to show up to this thing. I don't know how many people this next intensive is supposed to have, in the sense that whatever happens is what was supposed to happen. I can't know that. And so I turn the end result over to spirit. I put my attention here on what I can do. What can I do? I can make sure that I invite people. I can make sure I lean out over my edge and I get supported by my coach to stay committed and to invite the people that are scary to invite and to promise the things I promise and to do my own work and to talk about this thing because it's going to truly change people's lives. And I can ask for support and do all of the stuff that's scary about that. And in partnership with that, I turn the rest over to spirit. And that lifts me off of this spectrum, right? So I get the freedom that resignation allows for, right? Because there's a freedom to like, oh, well, I wished in a fountain, hopefully it happens, right? I don't have to be all freaked out and hate myself and my life and other people from that place. I get that freedom, but I also show up and take action the way that the attachment would have me take that action. So you get the best of both worlds, and that's the breakthrough in spirit. I want to be clear, it's not, at least for me, it's not been as simple as just being like, oh, got it, breakthrough in spirit. That's what I'm going to do. Great. That's what I'll take on. There's been a lot of work to create that and a lot of like falling down into the attachment, like, fuck this person. Rachel, my coach, help me fuck this person. Not literally, but just like, I can kind of go, how do I make this person wrong? Fuck this person. How do I make them know, fuck you? Oh, right. That's not the work. How do I get beyond that? And then choosing back into this other way of showing up in my life. So that's the opportunity. That, David, to your question, is how I say we get beyond that and create something different, as opposed to all of these workarounds, impossible goals, experiments, if you look at a lot of what's put out there, you'll notice that most coaching is, you can create these spectrums for so much stuff. Most coaching is like a reaction to whatever side of the spectrum the person used to be on. I used to be super attached and I hated myself. Come over here. I can teach you how to not be attached to stuff and look how great it is. And we just live our life as blah, 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 blah. Or the other version is like the Jocko, this guy's under fire by me, I noticed. The Jocko Willink's thing, like, I never seem to do what I say I want. And I just don't, just fucking do it. Make it happen. Just do it. So there's a reaction to these two sides. And all you end up getting is like, You get the benefit of the side you move to, but you lose the benefit of the side you've gone. And either way, you're getting kind of a half-life. You get 50% of what's available rather than the fullest expression, the 100% that's available through a breakthrough. Andrew, what resources am I fond of that explores the goal line and the soul line? Well, the book I would recommend doesn't explore this at all, really. It's The Last Word on Power, which I've referenced in the past. Here's the book by Tracy Goss. That's a great book, and it's about changing our inner stance as well as taking action. This is a great book too, Straight Line Leadership by Dusan Jukic. And this is a great book that does both of those things. These are books that are exploring the nexus between our being and our doing, as opposed to one or the other. It's really easy to hang out in these sort of false dichotomies, and that's where most coaching, most leadership, most of this stuff operates. Is like hang out here or hang out there, eat the frog, right? Do the thing. I don't know what the being version of that would be, but like just be you, and it all come into together. The law of attraction, that sort of stuff. So I don't have particular resources, but those are the ones I'm most familiar with. And then I know that that particular distinction belongs, I believe that comes from the University of Santa Monica. I've not gone through their program. I know lots of people that have, and then those people tend to come and work with Bay and I, a lot of them. So, and that's because they want that deeper, more ontological, like more full thing as opposed to just the soul line or whatever that allows for. Okay, my bladder's letting me know, yo, it's time to go. We've got to wind down. So I hope you all have an amazing Friday. Thanks everyone who's hung out. Big love to everyone. We're going to wind it down there. Take care. Have a good weekend. We'll talk soon.